Hi, gay. Happy Pride Month. We are sashaying away with...
Nightreign, in my opinion, can best be summarized in 3 words: not good enough. And look, I had fun playing with friends, it felt amazing to defeat a Night Lord, and I do appreciate this experimentation with a very different gameplay style. But all of these things are not nearly enough to mask or excuse the many aspects in which Nightreign struggles. And it struggles a lot. It struggles with the many facets of multiplayer game design, it struggles with solo play, it struggles with matchmaking, it struggles with performance issues, it struggles with being a roguelike. I mean, let's be honest, it's at most a glorified randomizer.
You struggling in all the categories. You gotta pick a struggle. You can't struggle in everything, bitch.
These are the things that I will be talking about in this video, starting with the entire multiplayer kerfuffle. So, one of the earliest things we knew about Nightreign is that you could either play solo or in groups of 3. Indeed, Miyazaki's continuous efforts of distancing himself from Dark Souls 2 have manifested in not being able to play Nightreign in a team of 2. Jokes aside, this was very strange. Souls games, from the very beginning, since the original Demon's Souls, were built with co-op with up to 3 people in mind. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that enemy scaling and behavior for co-op play is a bread and butter facet of FromSoft game design. This makes the absence of a 2-player mode very questionable. It makes you think that between solo and trio there are some aspects that are very hard to balance, but there aren't. Switching to solo play, I found that, ironically, scaling and maybe some enemy behavior is what changes. And that's it, mind you. The amount of time it takes for the circle to close is the same, the loot drops are the same, there's nothing here that justifies the absence of a 2-player mode. It doesn't surprise me that an announcement was made about a duo mode being added soon, because of course it would. Who in their right mind would not see that a 2-player mode is desired, expected, and frankly necessary? And you wanna know what's absolutely pathetic? The fact that modders added it on the very next day. And about 4 days later they made scaling work as well. This is humiliating. I never thought we'd see FromSoft on the same level as Bethesda's let modders fix our games. Genuinely embarrassing. It might be cynical of me to say, but it just seems like they couldn't be bothered, which has been a recurring thing in my experience with many other facets of Nightrein's design. Case in point, playing as a trio with randoms is made insanely frustrating because the game has missing features. There's no voice chat, no text box, not even a radial wheel that helps you communicate. The only thing you can do is drop a pin in a game where more complex forms of communication are required. Sometimes you need to be able to say, hey, let's stop attacking this thing because it kills us in 1 hit. Or hey, maybe we shouldn't go to this place because we're gonna get fucked. All of these things are not possible because there's no system for them. It feels identical to Elden Ring, in fact, because it also didn't have a communication system. Though, in all fairness, it also didn't need it, because it's rather straightforward. Reach the end, kill the boss. Nightreign, however, absolutely needs it, and I don't understand how. As a game designer, in the business of creating a co-op experience, how the fuck do you not consider the idea of communication? This is absurd, and it's a fantastic example of why Nightreign to me comes across as a shallow product. It feels very amateur, it lacks the mechanics that are necessary of the genre it tries to replicate, it lacks that finesse and purposefulness in game design that you've come to expect from the series. In fact, among the many bizarre design decisions was the solo play itself. As I said before, the game didn't do much to accommodate solo players at launch. With the exception of scaling and behavior, all other aspects were left the same. To my surprise though, playing alone was quite palatable. Were it not for the fact that dying was infinitely more punishing because no one is there to revive you. I've had some surprisingly good runs at launch, but dying at any end boss fully killed them. Now, to be clear, the very first patch Nightreign received alleviated some of these issues. You're now given 1 self-revive per night and also get a boost in runes received. Okay, that's nice, but to put it bluntly, why the fuck was this not in by default? How do you go through several stages of design and Q&A testing and somehow not realize that playing solo requires some sort of compromise. You know, Elden Ring and the other Souls games, their death system works because of the type of games they are. Yes, you lose your carried souls, but you don't lose other forms of progression and you're given one opportunity to get them back. Nightreign, while of course being a spin-off with similar mechanics, is not in the same overall genre. You can't just apply the same death mechanics and expect it to be or feel fair. That's why roguelike games usually feature a second chance mechanic or something similar. Dying is a massive pain point, especially when you have a good run going for you. It can feel like you just wasted time for nothing, especially with the dismal post-game rewards, but we'll talk about them later. The importance of a second chance or comeback feature lies in what it does for us psychologically. Because, let's face it, dying can and will feel cheap. A second chance mechanic creates a mental switch from the game being unfair to you understanding that you could have done better. Now, while the design choices we've discussed up to this point are rather short-sighted, I think it's time to move on to the truly idiotic. Oh yes, we're gonna talk about matchmaking. When it comes down to it, there's one golden rule that is key to creating a good matchmaking system. Do not dilute your player base. For a good example of what I mean here, we can take a look at Smite. Smite is a MOBA that draws inspiration from mythology.
Sure, Jan.
What makes it particularly pertinent as an example is the fact that it has a lot of modes. The ones that you see on the screen are not even all of them, as some are on rotation. This is very bad, because with each new mode there's a new matchmaking queue that takes away from your player base. You're not just spreading your players thin across several modes, but what you'll inevitably end up with are modes that are dead because no one wants to play them. And this is all without even mentioning that they also released Smite 2, which dilutes its player base even further. It's a mess. Now, Nightreign, in all fairness, does not have separate modes. However, it does have different final bosses, and each of them represents a separate matchmaking queue. This brings us to about 8 queues, which, okay, it's not ideal, but since Nightreign is made by FromSoft, we knew it would sell well enough that 8 separate queues wouldn't be a problem. Except that it gets much worse. After you beat the first boss, a new feature unlocks, Shifting Earth. These are things that change the map to include a special limited area that features different rewards. Yes, they are pretty neat, but that's not the problem. Each of these Shifting Earth events, including the absence of one, represents a separate queue, and I think we all know where I'm going with this.
Calculus. Oh, I don't even get into that.
To match with players, you need to choose the same boss and have the same Shifting Earth event they have. So, if we take the amount of bosses and the amount of Shifting Earth events, we come to a total of 40 separate matchmaking possibilities. This is insane, and yet somehow it gets worse. You see, every character has a set of quests, and the one you choose to do also affects matchmaking. Now, as far as I can tell, and I might be wrong here, each character has 2 remembrances that require you to go to Limeveld, so for those ones you can matchmake. Now, considering that we have 8 characters, let's input the numbers, and oh my fucking god. 680 matchmaking queue possibilities! This right here is dogshit. And I know that they put the game under maintenance to try and fix this. I mean, I'm assuming the way this worked is that matchmaking would pair you with people who are also doing the same remembrance, and now it also tries to pair you with people who are not doing any remembrances. But having tried it myself, I can tell you that matchmaking still takes very long. Either way, irrespective of that, I'm gonna be very blunt here. This sort of shit is not something you fix after your game is released. This is something you figure out when you're making it. This is something you have to keep in mind during development, because otherwise, if you have a broken matchmaking system, the more it takes you to fix it, the more people are gonna leave. And ultimately, when it's done, you're gonna have a reduced player base and those improvements will feel like they did nothing. It's fucking infuriating how many things this game has that feel amateur. It actively boggles my tiny mind, the absence of just quality, something, anything that makes me say, hey, this is well thought out. Before we move on to my problems with the gameplay itself, I want to bring up one more thing. Crossplay. We are, and this is a wild guess, in current year 2025. Nightreign is made by a company with lots of money and resources and the support of millions of fans. I am not going to pretend for 1 second that the absence of crossplay is in any way, shape or form acceptable. I don't care whatever opinion you may have on consoles or PC, but crossplay has become a standard in the gaming industry. In fact, what's funny to me, in a tragic way, is that Nightreign strikes me as rather similar in structure to another game called Raven's Watch, and that game is made by a studio that dwarfs in comparison to FromSoft. Despite that, Raven's Watch doesn't just handle a lot of my grievances with Nightreign fantastically, it also has crossplay. Am I saying that Raven's Watch is a better game than Nightreign? Well, yes. But even without this example, there are so many development studios of various sizes, all of which with barely a sliver of the resources and knowledge and fame, and yet they put in the time to add crossplay functionality. This is genuinely humiliating, and I honestly think that at this point FromSoft is getting complacent. I should also mention the game doesn't actually seem to be that well optimized either. Many players have complained about screen freezes, which I have experienced too. Though not very frequently, it does depend on your PC. One of the friends I played with would let us know whenever his screen would freeze, and I gotta say, it was very frequent for him. Let's now move on to talking about the gameplay, and I want to start by saying that I don't inherently dislike what Nightreign tries to do. I like Elden Ring's gameplay, I like mapping out what you can do, having to adapt when the circle closes somewhere else, etc, etc. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the smartest thing that Nightreign does is that it captures Elden Ring in a bottle. It's actually why I think that audiences warmed up to it after its mixed reception, because it lets you experience a random build in a non-committal environment. You don't need to spend hours on stat changes, upgrading or finding weapons, or even finish the game. You can just take 1 hour, have fun with a random build, and then move on. I do think that the game could give you some more time before the circle closes, that it could give you some more control when you fly, and that some of the field bosses could be toned down a bit. I mean, seriously, some of these guys are pretty damn wild damage-wise. But I don't mind it too much, and it could easily be changed in a future patch anyway. There are, however, some really stupid flaws, like some bosses, especially large ones, going outside or having most of their bodies outside in the rain, or some bosses being placed too close to other objectives, which leads to them being aggroed unintentionally. Just as well, many large bosses have a lot of issues with the terrain itself. The gargoyles are particularly frustrating in this respect, but by no means the only ones. I also think some of the raids should be reworked a bit, specifically in terms of when and where they happen. The Libra raid can spawn somewhat far and where the circle is already closing, so for the rest of the run you have a lot of health missing. But the one I absolutely hate is the Ogre raid. Yes, it's avoidable, but it can transport you really far away. It's infuriatingly difficult to do as a melee class, and the bonus is by far the most useless for the majority of the classes. This one actually felt at times like a genuine run killer. Let's now talk about the Night Lords, because I had some difficulty enjoying them, and there's two reasons for it. The first is, quite simply, that they can't stop fucking moving. Playing as a melee class in a trio feels like a joke. You spend your entire stamina trying to catch up to them, and then they just run away again.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
The second reason isn't about them directly, but rather with the game's design. You see, each boss has an element that they are weak to, and the thing is that if you don't use weapons or spells of that element, you'll actually be at a sizable disadvantage, as in, this can make or break your run. Now, I will say that this is to some extent antithetical to the design of previous games, because for the most part you wouldn't have to change your build to defeat a boss. But I'm okay with that, because via this weakness system the game does give you a clear sub-objective: get a weapon or sorceries of this type. So, let's say I'm fighting Gaping Dragon 2.0, poison is the way to go. Starting match, here we go, I open the map and oh, there's no poison encampment. This is the second reason I dislike these bosses, because they have a clear weakness, but whether the game gives you a way to exploit that weakness is RNG. And yes, I know that the merchant usually sells a weapon of that element, but you have to get lucky here as well, because these characters usually have preferences and scaling that make certain weapon types the best in slot. It's just such a strange design. Like, my friends and I managed to kill the first boss because we learned how fundamental the weaknesses are, and then we just kept getting maps with places that did not feature the element we needed. I just don't get this as a piece of design. Am I supposed to be fine with our chances of success falling purely because of RNG? That's just nonsense. Now, even if you get an emplacement with a certain element, you are not really guaranteed something that is useful for your class or the boss. Here's the thing, I understand the drops from chests being for all classes, it makes sense, they're accessible to everyone. The boss loot, however, is not, and this is where it gets frustrating. If I beat a camp, I expect that the loot choices I get are for my class specifically. But not only that, a lot of the time that's not the case, there's been a substantial amount of times where the weapon choices I'd get wouldn't even feature the element of the camp I just cleared. And that's the whole point in doing it. What is the design philosophy here? I'm not going out of my way to clear an elemental camp to get nothing useful out of it. It would be great if you could re-roll these choices if they were complete dogshit, but there isn't. It genuinely feels horrid how the game's RNG is stacked against you. The point of Souls games is overcoming hard challenges, not getting fucked over by luck. What's commonly done now is to just select a relic that gives you the element that you need or whatever works for you at the start, which is very ironic because the consequence of this design is that people stop interacting with your game as a randomizer. Like, a thing I've stopped doing fairly early on, and I've rarely seen other people do as well, is seeking out chests because it's a waste of time. This, unfortunately, also extends into the relics that you get, because they are fully RNG. Most of the time you'll get stuff that is not useful to you, or stuff that is partially good but would be much better on another class. And okay, I get it. It encourages you to try other classes out, and you don't feel like you're going into it empty-handed. But again, I just want some stuff that is also useful for the class that I play. It doesn't surprise me that the relics you get from remembrances are considered best in slot, because when the alternative is random garbage, you'll obviously go for the stuff that is specifically tailored for these classes. Oh, and by the way, whether you get to advance with these remembrances is also dependent on RNG, because fuck you. Now, all the things we've discussed, to be fair, are things that could be changed easily in the future. What isn't, however, is the fact that the game simply doesn't feel like a roguelike. Here's the thing, when I play a roguelike, what I get in the course of a run are passives and abilities that feel significant. They either contribute to my playstyle or can even change it. Raven's Watch is a sublime example in this case. The items you get give significant passives, your level ups upgrade your abilities and enable powerful synergies, and there is a way you can re-roll your rewards so that you don't feel like the RNG is unfair. Nightreign fails to live up to my expectations of a roguelike, because the things you get don't feel significant. The improvements are minor, and because of the way the characters are designed, you're encouraged not to change your playstyle. I mean, even from the start, I found it silly that the way you get passives is by getting more weapons in your inventory. I get having reserve weapons in case you want to store more types of damage or whatever have you, but this is otherwise a very weird implementation of passives. The passives themselves are also pretty tame. Yes, a 6% damage increase on charge attacks. It's not like it takes an entire stamina bar and 5 to 6 business days to catch up to a Night Lord. Trying to sneak in a charge attack is the least of my worries, and the fact that you can have at most 6 weapons means that the passives are quite limited on top of being somewhat insignificant. Now, bosses also give you passives, and I honestly think that they offer far more significant stat increases, but they still have their fair share of really weird things. Like health regen if a certain element procs in a run where neither the boss nor its weakness or the map itself had places that give you such elements. Worse still is how some options are really badly worded, like this one because you expect there to be additional regen after using the flask, but no, it replaces the instant heal with a continuous one. That's why you have to be perfectly clear in explaining what something does, because you don't want a reward to feel like a downgrade that could ruin your run. The only times Nightreign came as close as it could be is when I'd get those passives with Magic Rain or Thunder when dodging. this is not nearly enough. And look, in a sense, I get that the type of game Nightreign does have some conflicts with the idea of a roguelike. Souls games are defined by their difficulty in overcoming overbearing odds and strong enemies, while roguelikes are about putting random things together to eventually get a build with fun and unique playstyles that can really break the balance of the game. These two seem incompatible, but I'd argue that the mark of a talented developer is designing compromises that combine these genres successfully. Unfortunately, this is not the case, which makes the game feel like a weird mix between a randomizer and a boss rush mode. That's the thing with Nightreign. In trying to understand why a significant part of me enjoyed it, I've come to realize that it's because it rests on the strong foundation that is Elden Ring. What it adds on top is not only not that much, it's also not impressive, and its technical blunders make it even less so. But I do have one final problem, and it's a big one, because on top of all of that, Nightreign is, at its core, very repetitive and lacks replayability. The map never changes, the caves are always the same and in the same spot, the individual location types are identical minus their mobs and bosses. In fact, even these mobs tend to be very repetitive as well. I had one run where I went to 3 camps and all 3 had Redmane Knights. I think this goes to show how repetitive it can be. I do like the shifting earths mechanic. It changes an entire part of the map, adds more enemies that are fantastic for farming, and have really good rewards at the end, and the mountaintop. I do, however, think that there are some problems, because if you don't consistently win, this feature will feel inactive, because they activate after you beat a specific number of Night Lords. But then I also went through all 4 of them, and after they disappeared, they never came back again. At any rate, other than that, and maybe the raids, of which there are like 5, there's little else to experience. But in terms of replayability, there's not much to talk about either. Because Limeveld itself is repetitive as a play space, you run out of new things to look forward to. And the game's own gameplay loop doesn't have that much going for it either. What you keep between runs are the relics and merc, the game's currency, and the merc itself you can spend on more relics or chalices or some cosmetic stuff. This is, in short, Nightreign's adaptation of the roguelike concept of building your character through multiple runs. But because chalices allow up to 3 relics per character, and you might get some via good RNG and from Night Lords and remembrances, this bit can be very short, so by the time I beat the final boss, there wasn't anything else to look forward to. My main was built as well as I could be bothered to, I've experienced everything Limeveld had in terms of places and events, and I am not that interested in farming merc to buy really overpriced skins. Also, shame on you for not making Lucatiel a skin, she's one of the best things to come out of Dark Souls 2.
Sometimes I feel obsessed with this insignificant thing called self.
But apart from that, the only other thing you could do is try some of the other characters or do their quests. That's it, and I can only speak for myself, but it wasn't enough. The play space is just that lacking in excitement. It needs way more, and the thing is that Nightreign obviously has no problems taking bosses from previous games, which honestly I've had no issue with. It was nice seeing some of these guys again, and to experience a change from the fucking breakneck attack speed some Elden Ring bosses have. So why not do more? Why not take places? Some regular enemies too? Nightreign kinda has this feeling of celebration of years of Souls games, and it could have pushed it much further. Because it doesn't have this wild diversity of tilesets and possibilities, the sole replayability value was within the individual stories of the Nightfarers. But to be blunt here, the story isn't that strong. I don't want to lean on the idea that spin-offs inherently have weaker stories, but this is true for Nightreign. It is not connected to the events of Elden Ring, it doesn't feature that deep storytelling that is emblematic of the series, the weapon descriptions are copy-pasted and don't tell a story, its environment even less so. Even the hub itself feels shallow, with meaningless interactions. It reminded me a bit of the hub from Hades, if Hades had nothing going for it. It's honestly kind of impressive how wrong Nightreign gets the idea of a roguelike. Repetitive and lacking in replayability are the last things you want to be. So where does this leave us? First of all, I want to reiterate that I do really appreciate the intent of taking the type of gameplay FromSoft does and trying to make something new out of it. That being said, this is not it. I understand that going into a new genre is difficult because there are many complexities that won't be obvious to you. I can empathize with that, but there are many things that are obvious and very poorly handled. The crossplay, the duo mode, the thousands of matchmaking possibilities. I am willing to be permissive of some of the flaws it has as a roguelike because at the end of the day I had fun with my friends, and Elden Ring's gameplay is ultimately engaging and elevates what Nightreign is. But there's too much wrong here, and I think FromSoft has a lot of work to do. I really hope that they will take the time to improve the game further, because the thing is that FromSoft is in the special position of being an industry darling, and that's in an environment where gaming communities usually don't stick around releases that have negative or mixed receptions. Despite that, I'm sure they will stick around for Nightreign, and I hope FromSoft doesn't get complacent over doing right by them. And that's all I have to say for this video, and there goes my intention of making shorter videos. Do like and subscribe to help me out in the algorithm, and as always, have a good one.